Hello and welcome to the Blue Monday podcast, a 3 times weekly show looking into the exciting happenings at Ipswich Town Football Club. And in this special edition of the Flagship show, it's an absolute honour to be joined by an Ipswich Town Hall of Famer. With 314 appearances, 45 goals and 2 Supporters Player of the Year awards to his name, it's the captain, it's Matt Holland. How are you, Matt?
I'm pretty good, thank you. Yeah, yourself?
Yeah, not doing too badly. How are you dealing with the self-isolation?
I'm going a bit stir crazy now. Could do with some football. How am I coping? I'm a bit sunburnt. You can tell I was out in the garden yesterday. The boys have been running me ragged in the garden. They're both here now. I've got a son who's out in America doing his uni, but he's come back, so he's doing online classes. And the other one works in London, but he's back and set up an office here as well. So they're running me ragged in the garden. I've got a little bit sunburnt, but I'm all good.
Excellent. It's good to hear. So I'm sure you're aware, Matt, that the Renegade Statman did a fine interview last week with your old mate Jim Magilton.
Well, how could I refuse your request once Super Jim said yes?
Of course. And Jim was given one word to describe you. I don't know if you've listened yet, but he chose gorgeous. What would you choose as your word for Jim?
Cool. Motor mouth.
Okay.
Automatic gums. Yeah. I also saw he said he wouldn't like to self-isolate with me. I was a bit disappointed with that. And mind you, I'm not sure I'd want to self-isolate with Jim either. I think after an hour, it might run a bit. It might be a bit too much for me.
Excellent. And as in your introduction, the stats that I used, of course, came from the Renegade Statman. So he did a favour for me. My favour to him is to ask you how you feel about being on 49 island caps rather than 50.
Well, it's funny, actually. I mean, I can't turn my computer around, but I've got my caps above me here in a cabinet. And each season you got a cap. You didn't get one per game, but each season you got one, and it gives you a number. If you add the numbers up, it gets to 50. So work that one out. I actually played a B international as well. So maybe they've counted the B international. It does count up to 50 on my cap. So he loves Jim as well, doesn't he? So Jim's his favourite player. So I'm a bit disappointed by that as well.
Brilliant. So let's go back to the start of your Ipswich Town career. And after 2 full seasons in the third tier with Bournemouth, you signed for Ipswich in 1997 for £800,000. You'd come through the West Ham Academy. Did you see Ipswich as a stepping stone in your career when you first signed, or did you have a feeling that Portman Road might be a long-term destination for you?
I didn't really know, to be honest. I mean, I'd gone from West Ham and who were in the Premier League at the time, down to Bournemouth. I was at an age where I needed to be playing first-team football. I wasn't happy, just kicking my heels in the reserves, and I needed to be playing regular first-team football. And of course, like many West Ham players at that time under Harry Redknapp, you ended up going down to Bournemouth because everyone seemed to do that. I went there and had 2 really good years under Mel Machin. He was a brilliant manager. Someone who really, I think, brought out leadership qualities in me from an early age, to be quite honest. I mean, I think I had them anyway because I was captain at youth levels and reserves for West Ham. But in terms of taking it to the next level, he really brought out that leadership character from me. So I had 2 brilliant years there. But the moment that George Burley came and spoke to me, we were at the Royal Bath in Bournemouth. I remember it vividly. I hadn't been that long going out with my wife. And I came back from the meeting and I said, we're moving. And she said, what do you mean we're moving? She said, well, I'm moving. I'm going to Ipswich. I'd like you to come. At which, that fortunately enough, she did. But once I spoke to George, it was, my mind was made up really that I was going to come to Ipswich. And such a rich history. Growing up, I used to go and watch my dad play football on a Saturday, and after the games, there'd always be the lads asking me what the results were, because I was the one with the radio listening to the results, and I'd be sort of going, well, Ipswich won, and Paul Cooper saved the penalty, and I remember saying it virtually every week. So I grew up knowing a lot about Ipswich and the history, the late 70s, early 80s, what a brilliant team they were. And George, actually, it was funny because he said I first came to his attention playing for West Ham reserves against him when he was the manager at Colchester. He actually played in a reserve game at Layer Road, and he said that was the moment that he sort of kept an eye on me. So once I went to Bournemouth and had a couple of years down there, they'd watched me an awful lot. I think the report, the chief scout and everything, they probably watched me about 20 odd times. So, but George was, he didn't really need to sell the club to me. I knew all about Ipswich Town, and I was determined once I knew of their interest that I was coming.
Excellent. It actually was quite a difficult start that season in terms of the team and results, but it ended up being a pretty good one. We finished in 5th. We had memorable wins over Manchester United, who you used to support, of course, before you became an Ipswich fan, and the 5-0 win against Norwich as well. What are your memories of that first season, and in particular those 2 games?
Well, first and foremost, when George signed me, he signed me to replace Steve Sedgley, and there was a feeling that obviously Sedge was playing in a back 3, and when tactically we could change things, I could move into midfield, and like Steve Sedgley had done the previous season. I think not that I was frustrated, but 10 games in, I think the first time he moved me into midfield was against Stoke. And although we lost the game 3-2, I scored in the game. And then I think I scored in the next game against Torquay. Playing in midfield, I scored twice against Torquay in the Cup.
Oh, the old Coca-Cola Cup, yeah.
The old Coca-Cola Cup, yeah. So those, I scored 3 goals in 2 games. And I think that was the moment where I think he thought I perhaps got too much energy to play at the back. I was obviously... I really prided myself on being able to get about the pitch and being a box-to-box midfielder. And I think at that point, George thought I'd probably got too much energy to be playing at the back, and obviously ended up playing more and more in midfield. The games I remember the Man United game very well, because obviously it was the first time I'd played against Man United, and Mauricio Taricco scored that wonderful goal as well. Great character he was. And the Norwich game, wow! That was something else, wasn't it? Alex Matthew hat-trick, Bobby Petr scoring 2. Alex Matthew actually came off at half-time in that game, didn't he? And he'd scored a hat-trick, and then Bobby Petr scored a couple as well. So that was a fabulous day, and a really good introduction to East Anglian derby life.
And of course, you even stepped up to playing goal that season, a 5-2 win against Oxford. Did you fancy yourself as a keeper? You're under 6 foot, of course, or was it sort of delegated to you? They were like, Matt will do it.
No, well, I actually did fancy myself as a bit of a goalkeeper, not at any level, by the way. But I'd done it for West Ham reserves at Arsenal, actually, at Highbury. And I went in goal, and we ended up losing the game 2-1. But I played the whole of the second half in goal in that game. I think the goalkeeper got sent off, so we played 10 men. And I let 1 goal in, but I had made a couple of good saves, so I did fancy it. And in training, I used to sort of be one who would dive around and do stupid things. And I ended up sort of getting the job. Look back, and it was ridiculous, because Richard Wright went off and the shirt was down my knees. I looked absolutely ridiculous doing it. And then, of course, Kevin Francis, wasn't he, who scored?
Yeah.
Against
7'4" of him.
Well, 6'7" or 6'8" or whatever he was, and I came trying to bring the ball above him. Even with my hands, I couldn't even reach him. So that was ridiculous. It was quite an eventful game, that as well, because I scored in the game, gave away a penalty late on as well. I don't think there's too many who've gone in goal, let a goal in, scored, and then given a penalty away in the same game.
No, it was quite incredible, and yeah, brilliant time to be an Ipswich fan. That was my first year as a season ticket holder, and we seem to be putting 5 past teams every week, or twice a week in that case.
Well, I think we did it 3 or 4 games in a row, didn't we? I think we scored 5.
There's Port Vale, Oxford, Norwich, and yeah, I'm sure there was a couple of others in there as well. And you personally ended up with 12 goals in that first season, and you're a regular goal scorer throughout your career. I'd say that your late runs into the box were what you were known for. Obviously, Frank Lampard went through the same West Ham academy as you. Was that something that was taught at West Ham, or was it just a strength that you sort of developed as you went on?
Not really. I think it was something that I always wanted to play central midfield. You've already said that I was a Man United. You've outed me already. Cheers, thanks for that. As a Man United fan growing up, I was born near Manchester, and I actually went to school with the Neville brothers, Gary and Phil Neville. They were a little bit young. Gary was a year below me, and Phil was 3 years, I think, below me. And you're either a Man United fan or a Man City fan at that time. And I was obviously a United fan as well. And I prided myself really on Brian Robson. He was someone that when he joined Man United, I mean, captain fantastic. He was someone that I looked at and thought, he plays through the pain barrier. He picks up knocks and bruises, but the way he used to make those runs into the box as well, he used his energy to get beyond the striker. I don't think we see enough of that now in Premier League football or football generally. The midfielder going beyond the strikers and making those runs. I think they almost get pigeonholed now as a holding midfield player and number 10. But I don't even number 10s. I don't think. I think they always want to come to the ball rather than go in behind at times, and I'd like to see that. I'd like to see that more in general in football. But yeah, it was Brian Robson really. Not that I was anywhere near as good as him, but he was the one that I sort of did look at and think I'd like to be a bit like that.
Okay, excellent. And I believe it was the following season that you took over the captaincy from Tony Mowbray. Is that right?
Yeah,
98-99 season.
I think was it not Grant Williams? Grant Williams had been the captain, I think, and obviously Tony was a skipper as well. Obviously a senior figure. But yeah, I was obviously hugely honoured that George, made me a captain at such a young age, really, as well. Because I only joined in '97. I was 23 at the time when I joined, so I'd have been 24 being made captain.
Yeah, was that difficult with all those senior players like you mentioned Grant Williams and Tony Mowbray, and there was one or two others that had been there a long time as well. Was it hard for a young player, or was that something that you just took in your stride?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I'd been captain, as I say, growing up, pretty much been captain at every team I played for, whatever team it was, school or club side, or and then even sort of West Ham, I was the captain of the youth team, captain of the reserves. I've been captain at Bournemouth for 2 seasons previously as well, in difficult circumstances down at Bournemouth as well. So it wasn't something that fazed me really. To be honest, I actually think that my job was easy, really, being a captain at Ipswich, because of the senior figures, because we had enough leaders in the dressing room anyway. Well, it wasn't just me. There was a number of players that were sort of captain material and big voices and big characters. So no, I didn't feel any real pressure of being skipper.
And of course, it was another step towards being Brian Robson as well, wasn't it, with the captain's armband?
Well, it's funny because I was always number 7 as well growing up. So I always used to wear number 7. Even at Bournemouth, my number was number 7 at Bournemouth, and it was only once I went to Ipswich and got the number 8 shirt that's when number 8 became my number throughout my career. But it only changed at Ipswich getting the number 8 shirt.
Okay, and it's obviously stuck with you because even your Skype address it's got the number 8 in it. I won't give it away to all the viewers and listeners.
Don't tell everyone. Most people will be able to guess what it is now.
So I've mentioned Jim Magilton already. He joined in that 98-99 season on loan initially. And I must mention a number of your ex-teammates, Roy Keane. When Jim Magilton signed, he said he wanted to raise the standards and intensity on the training pitch. Do you have any memories of that? And was it similar to your experiences training with Roy Keane in that respect?
Jim was very demanding, in a good way, because and actually Roy as well were quite similar really in that respect. Their demands, just as soon as you cross the white line, whether it be training or a football match, were incredibly high. Their own personal standards were very high, and they expected everybody else to follow and do exactly that as well. In terms of trying to remember a particular incident with Jim on the training ground, I mean, look, he snapped and snarled. If you didn't pass him the ball, he'd be screaming at you, and he was very competitive. But I think we're all competitive in different ways. And Jim was obviously very vocal and very animated about the way he went about things. It might have intimidated one or two, I don't know. But I actually really enjoyed. I love Jim, and he's got this saying: "Let the what is it? Let the runners run.
Let the players play." Yeah,
let the runners run. Players play, let the runners run. And he always used to say, "I'm the legs, and he's the player," which fair enough, no problem at all. But he did raise standards, and there's a couple of times he sort of said to me as well, just have a bit more belief in your own ability as well, because I'm someone who generally, even in everyday life, I'm quite safe and do things straight and do things the right way, and even at football sometimes I could probably be a bit safe at times. He wasn't the only person that said that to me. Alan Pardew once said it to me at Charlton as well. I wasn't ambitious enough in my passing at times, but I had my strengths, and that's why it works so well really with myself and Jim, I think, in midfield, because we're so different as well, and our the way we played and went about the game, we are very different, and if you're going to be a good pair, you've got to marry those attributes up, and I think together I thought we were a good pair. And of course, we played three in midfield a lot as well, as Jermaine Wright, Tommy Miller, whoever else it was that played in the middle of midfield as well, that contributed to that. But I did enjoy playing with Jim.
Yeah, I was going to get onto that actually, because Kieron Dyer was sold to Newcastle at the end of 98-99, and this is an area that we've covered quite extensively on Blue Monday over the last few weeks and even years. But Burley reinvested the money really wisely. But did you have to change your game when Magilton became your sort of full-time partner, and how different was he to play with than Kieron Dyer?
I think because obviously when Kieron first played in midfield, it was actually at the expense of Grant Williams, because Grant Williams had been playing there and he was very much a holding midfield player. So for me, reins off, get in the box, that's the way I wanted to play. That suited me down to the ground. With Kieron, obviously he had more energy than I had, probably. He was someone that was like human dynamo, wasn't he? He was here, there, and everywhere. And then not so much alter it, because I think then it was a case of perhaps taking it in turns, or being a bit more sensible about when you make your runs as well, because you couldn't have both me and Kieron making our way into the penalty box and then getting caught the other way as well. So I guess that's where my experience, I guess, and having played a few more games than Kieron as well, maybe came into it, and maybe allowed Kieron at times to go further forward. And then when Jim came in, he was someone, although he liked to get forward at times as well, and he got plenty of goals, and he'll remind you of that. He'll tell you about his hat-trick until you're blue in the face, and he'll put you to sleep with it, no doubt about it. But he was someone that generally wanted to go and get the ball off the back four and try and play from there, which gave me, again, a little bit more freedom to get up with the strikers and go and get the second balls off them at times.
Yeah, so would you agree that it made you a better player, having Magilton alongside you, because you were so different? I
don't know, really. I that's for others to judge, really. I wouldn't ever say, that because I was alongside Jim, but certainly he helped me as well, in midfield, and talking to me and organising things as well from behind at times. It's easier. I actually think it's easier to be a captain at centre half. I think that's the best. That's probably the best position to be a captain, because you can see everything and you can dictate everything, and you're not having to make all those runs everywhere. So you've got a bit more energy and a bit more breath to make those decisions at times. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that midfield is the best position to be a captain. But certainly playing alongside Jim was never a chore.
No, not at all. And you, despite having that midfield of you, Jim, and Kieron Dyer, we just missed out in the playoffs against Bolton in 98-99. You were ever present once again. Do you think that it was a bit of bad luck, or were we just still not quite there as a team yet, not quite ready for promotion?
Well, we've been knocking on the door. It's my second playoff and the club's third. So we were knocking on the door. I think we're a little bit unlucky, actually. I thought we were a little bit, we went out on away goals in that semi-final, didn't we, against Bolton? Kieron scored a couple, didn't he, in the game at Portman Road, and I did as well. Actually, that goal against Bolton in that second leg at Portman Road is one of my son's favourites of mine, because you said about breaking forward, and I said about getting beyond the strikers at times as well. But that is that is the archetypal third man run where, the play's building up and I make the run. And actually I ended up playing with Klaus Jensen at Charlton, and he's the one, if you watch it, I run off him and he's about 20 yards before I'm 20 yards beyond him before he even turns around and sees where I am. And that's one of my son's favourite goals. He always says that to me. He says, I love that goal of yours, Dad. I really enjoy it. So, but that is the archetypal third man run. And what I say is missing out of today's game, I think.
Another area of your game that was particularly strong was your tackling. And I remember sitting in the Britannia stand, my dad always used to say, watch how Matt Holland tackles. You used to fly in at such pace that you were never going to get injured and you were always going to get the ball. But at the same time, you weren't a dirty player. But do you think if you were playing now, you would have to adapt your tackling slightly? Because you were hard and fair, but can you even be that now?
I think I would have to be a bit more careful about flying into some of the tackles that I did. Yeah. There was one actually in the World Cup, and he's sadly no longer with us now, Marc-Vivien Foé, against Cameroon in that first game. And it's funny because playing alongside Roy for Ireland as well, he was always someone that early on in the game made a big tackle just to get the crowd up, just to get that noise around the stadium. And good tackle is as good as a goal at times because it can generate an atmosphere. And one particular game we played against Holland, and he put Mark Overmars about 8 foot in about 8 foot in the air. It's a famous moment. But in that World Cup, I made a really big, strong challenge on Marc-Vivien Foé early on in the game as well, where you win the ball, but your trailing leg catches him as well, and that's the sort of tackle that you'd have to be really careful of, and probably I wouldn't be able to make now if I was playing football now. Was
it given as a foul?
No. Because I'd pretty much as you said, really. I won the ball, but the follow through and the trailing leg then caught him quite strongly. Let's put it that way. And so that's something I'd certainly have to be careful of. I don't know whether you're trying to allude. I mean, I was quite lucky, really. I didn't get too many yellow cards either, or whatever. I don't know if you're trying to get to it, but the challenge against Alex Ray at Sunderland.
Oh, okay. I think was that in the 2-1 defeat?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah,
and I probably should have been sent off. I made a challenge on Alex Ray, just I think right on half time and quite near the dugout as well, where he went high and I went higher, and actually afterwards Peter Reid was really good about it and sort of said, "Oh no, he's good strong challenge and all that sort of stuff." But actually, if you watched it again now, you'd say it was a definite red.
Yeah, well, we've been watching back the playoff semi-finals quite extensively recently, and there was a tackle that Tony Mowbray did I think it was in extra time, where he pretty much two foots the Bolton player running with the ball and just sort of ends up just sitting on the ball. And the commentator says, what a fantastic tackle it was. And you watch it now and you think, wow, like that wouldn't be considered a good tackle now. But just another question on, if you were still playing, Matt, would you still be wearing Adidas World Cups and Copa Mundials?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think coloured boots suit me. Do you? Long, I don't know, coloured hair or shaved hair and tattoos, coloured boots. It's not really my thing. In fact, towards the end of my career, it was getting to the stage where the lads were just hammering me really for having black and white boots because coloured boots were all the rage. They used to even call me the referee at Charlton. I think the last 2 years they used to call me the ref because I continued to wear them, and even now I've still got that's all I've got is the black and white boots. My brother used to work for Mizuno, and he got me a pair of I don't know whether they're yellow or white, and I was at a charity game at Stamford Bridge, and I put them on. Honestly, I just looked at them and thought, what am I doing? Get them off. Get the Copas back on. And so no, it's always Copas and World Cups in matches, because I always wore studs in matches. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if you look. I mean, even if the pitch was rock hard, I always wore even a small stud, because that then differentiated between training and a game for me. When it became business and it became match day, I had the studs on. In training,
so they were like your business suit then, in a way.
They were like the suit. So training. Copa Mundials, I can see him in the background. What a pair of boots. So I always wore training Copas, but when it came to match day, I always wore a stud, even if it was rock hard. I'd even just put the small ones in, and I always wear studs for match day.
Excellent. Absolute throwback. You mentioned the Charlton players taking the mickey out of you. I'm curious to know, you were really immensely popular amongst the Ipswich fans, Charlton fans, Bournemouth fans, and Republic of Ireland fans. And after every game, you would do the lap of appreciation where you clapped all four corners of the ground. Was that something that you really thought about doing, or just came naturally? And did the players take the mickey out of you for it?
I don't. Not to my face, they didn't. Anyway, they probably did. I'm sure. It was something that I did at Bournemouth. Actually, it was something that I started at Bournemouth and continued when I came to Ipswich. For me, the supporters are so important. You know, they pay you great money to come and watch you play, for you to entertain them, for you to put in a 100% performance. Now, look, you can't always play well, but as long as they see that they're getting 100% effort, and I appreciated the fact that they would, you know, save up, buy a season ticket, come to the game through thick and thin, you know, be behind us, and the support was magnificent, and that was the reason why I did it, and that's why I started it at Bournemouth and continued it at Ipswich, and I suppose that helped, maybe helped a connection, an early connection between me and the supporters.
Yeah, it was definitely appreciated, and yeah, look back on those memories with such fondness. And speaking of fondness, let's move into the 2009, the 99-2000 team. And how impressed were you by George Burley's recruitment going into that season?
Yeah, I think, you know, George clearly did his homework on players, and personalities, obviously. But in terms of players, he wanted those that could play. You know, passing was his mantra. It was something that he'd been brought up himself on with Sir Bobby Robson. Every training session, without fail, we started with a passing drill. You know, obviously we did our warm up, but passing drill every single day in training with George. You know, at times you'd sort of be looking at, we're doing it again, we're doing the passing drill again. But honestly, the repetition and you know, it just became natural to do it, and even if it was 5 yards, 10 yards, 15 yards, whatever it might have been, the distance that the passes, it just became natural to do it. And all the players that he signed could all play. They all wanted to pass the ball. You know, you think like Mark Venus signed the same time as me, actually. You know, wanted to play, wanted to get on the ball, he demanded the ball. You know, the ball was his friend, a bit like Jim. John McGreal, same, could play. Jermaine Wright could play. Marcus Stewart, all those players that I'm talking about, all wanted the ball and all could pass the ball. And that was, I think, when George was signing a player, was the thing that he probably looked at the most. So yeah, I think his ability to pick a player was outstanding.
And what was George Burley's man management like as well? Was he good with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I say the lad didn't necessarily to my face take the mickey about the lap of honour, they took the mickey out of me about my relationship with George at times, and used to call me son of, and so yeah, that look, I obviously have got a lot of time for George, and of all the managers that I've ever had, he was the one that spent the most amount of time on making me a better player individually. Now, you know, obviously managers do a lot of group sessions, but in terms of individual stuff, it's not something that you'd necessarily see as much. But George, not just me, by the way, it was other players in the team as well, and there's certain weaknesses in their game that he looked at and thought, right, how can I improve them? Now, George was a brilliant passer, so the thing that he used to say to me, and his analogy was golf clubs. So he used to say, right, you've got the driver, you've got the 3-iron, the 4-iron. He said, what you need now is a bit more finesse in your game. You need the sand iron, you know, the pitching wedge, those little delicate balls at times. And that was one of the things that he worked heavily on, just getting the ball out my feet, just lifting balls into the strikers at times, just those more delicate balls rather than driver. Because, you know, that big switcher play, if you like, at times, get out your feet and drive one out to the wing. I found that quite natural, but there was things that I didn't. So that he worked heavily on that, getting on the half turn, looking to play forward. So in terms of trying to make me a better player, he's the manager that spent the most amount of time on a training ground trying to improve me as an individual.
And it's certainly paid off, didn't it? Because that 99-2000 season was absolutely superb. But we just fell short and ended up in the playoffs against Bolton as well. Were you and the players that were there the season before thinking about revenge, or were you starting to think psychologically, are we ever going to do this, or were you quite confident because we'd finished a long way ahead of Bolton again?
Yeah, I think what I felt that season, not necessarily revenge at all. I think what I felt was, this is our turn. I mean, it's easy to say that now, isn't it? But because of how it all ended up. But we'd gone behind in so many games and through that season, and the character in the side to come back at times, I think was there for everyone to see. And I think I just had that feeling that no matter what was thrown at us, we were experienced enough now to deal with it, and that's obviously how it turned out. Clearly, going away from home and being behind again, and obviously Marcus Stewart masterclass in the first leg. He was, I mean, terrific play. You talk about a player that's just made that difference as well for us. His movement. Personally, think he should have played for England. The fact that he didn't, I was amazed really. Maybe just that he hasn't got that half a yard of pace, but the first 3 or 4 yards was in his head anyway. His movements get away from defenders was unbelievable. Yeah, and so he maybe made a big difference for us. And obviously his 2 goals were moments of class. The first one, smashing one in from 30 yards, and the other one going around a keeper.
Sorry, Matt, on that first goal, I do have a question written down on that one that Rich wanted to know. It looked like Stewart sort of gestures over his shoulder when you got the ball just over halfway. Did he sort of tell you to play that ball over to him because he was going to have a shot, or did it not quite happen like that? Was it all sort of just playing off instinct?
I think just playing off instinct. I certainly don't remember him saying it. I don't remember him saying anything to me. But certainly, when you try and play a ball to someone, it's weight of pass, it's appreciation, what they're going to do with it. If you whack it at him, he's got to get it under control. Then he's got to turn. Just by being a bit more delicate with the pass, I guess it gave him the opportunity to then make his mind up. He didn't have to have a touch. He could just turn. I would have shouted time. Free to turn or whatever. So it just by playing a slightly softer pass meant that he didn't have to bring it under control and do all the hard work before he could, obviously caught the goalkeeper unawares. Don't get me wrong, it's not the best assist you'll ever see in the world, and it's not what I'm claiming. It's not, I wasn't trying to set him up to shoot a goal particularly, but I was setting him up to, he didn't have to have a touch and he could turn in one movement. And the second one was a moment of class as well. He's obviously very composed in front of goal.
Yeah, but that's quite a long-standing debate amongst Ipswich fans, is what was the better goal. As his teammate, what one would you go for? I
think the second one was harder. I think the first one is just instinct. It's just, I scored a few from that sort of distance as well, and as much as you're aiming to hit the target, you're not necessarily picking that particular spot out. You're aiming to strike it hard and cleanly and see where it goes. But the second one needed a bit more composure about it. I'd probably say that in terms of technical ability, the second one was a much harder finish.
And that set the second leg up quite beautifully, didn't it? 2-2. Obviously, away goals didn't count at this stage. Got them back to Portman Road. Incredible atmosphere that night. It was the best game that I've ever been to. Was it the best game you've ever played in?
I think it'd probably have to be. It'd probably have to be. I still send a Christmas card to Barry Knight now and again. Not really. I know Sam.
He got every decision right, as far as I'm concerned.
And me. I think Sam Allardyce still looks at it quite bitterly, doesn't he? But no, it was incredible. It ebbed, flowed. I mean, Jim McGilton scoring a hat trick. It was just ridiculous penalties. It had absolutely everything, and probably quite drained actually at the end of it as well because of the emotions. You're going through. We're not going through. Are we going to get to Wembley? We're not going to get to Wembley. The emotions just ebbed and flowed the whole evening. So I can. At least on the pitch, you're in control of it. I always used to say that, I used to hate watching matches that my team was a part of, because you can't influence the game. There's nothing you can do about it. And I'd be kicking and heading every single ball on the touchline if I wasn't playing. And so if I was a supporter, I'd have been exactly like that. I'd have been an absolute nightmare. I'd have been a nervous wreck. On the pitch, actually, I think I was fine. I think I was okay. Of course, the emotions are running high. And at times I had to calm one or two down. I think I had to calm Jim down a couple of times as well in that game. Not for the first time, I might add. But I think when you're playing, there's a sense of serenity about it, and that you're able to control the destiny of it.
Yeah, I mean, I was only 8 years old
at
the time, so but yeah, maybe I didn't quite take in just how nerve-wracking it was. I obviously was nervous, but I think deep down I always sort of knew that we were going to do it, but that was just 8-year-old me. So at the end of the game, the fans run on the pitch, and I can remember you being held aloft. What was that like, and what are your memories of the celebrations that night? Did you go out on the town?
It was actually quite frightening, to be honest, when the fans came on. I was thinking, how am I ever going to get back to the dugout? Because I think I was on about the halfway line when I first got stopped, and I was thinking, I don't think I'm ever going to get off the pitch. I think it was quite intimidating at the time. We did celebrate, yeah, we did. We went to a bar just around the corner from Portman Road. Didn't stay long. I had a couple of beers, but to be honest, you've still got a job to do. That's the thing. That at that point we weren't promoted. It was a brilliant feeling. Don't get me wrong. For the first time we got to the final, but the most important thing was winning the final at Wembley. And although it was 10, 11 days ago away, my feeling really at that point was we've still got the job to do. We've still got to get promoted. It's nice getting the pat on the back. We've done really well tonight, but actually the most important one now is 10 days down the line. So I think that would have been my overriding thought at that time.
Yeah, you mentioned the 10 days up to the final because it was on the bank holiday Monday, wasn't it? I'm interested to know how you filled that time, and was it really difficult mentally preparing yourself over such a long period of time?
Yeah, I remember George kept saying, I want everything to be as normal as possible. And that was his sort of thing about it. Everything that we'd done in the season, he didn't want to change anything. He wanted everything to be the same. And he didn't want to try and, feel like it was a much bigger game than what we've gone through already. And he just tried to be as normal as possible about training. So we didn't do anything spectacular. We didn't do anything different. We just kept doing the same things, going to the Playford Road and training as normal, and so nothing was altered at all in the build up to the final. It was just exactly as we'd been doing it. I think we went a couple of days. I think we went 2 nights before, and stayed at a hotel in Windsor before the final. But that was. I mean, we'd always stayed overnight for matches away anyway, so it wasn't like a massive deal either.
And then on to the final, the 29th of May 2000, you lived every Ipswich fan's dream by leading the team out at Wembley, albeit alongside Jamie Scowcroft, who missed out. Can you explain to us, mere mortals, how that felt walking out and seeing the 35,000 Ipswich fans and 35,000 Barnsley fans at the other end?
You've actually just given me goosebumps now just talking about it. As a kid growing up, it was a dream, really, for me. Football will always be my life. Growing up, my dad was not a bad player, and I used to go and watch him every Saturday. And my first pair of football boots I slept in for a week. Football literally was my life. And growing up, being a United fan, as you've said, 83 cup final, 85 cup final, they won both of those, and that dream of walking up the steps and lifting a trophy at Wembley was there from an early age. It's all I ever wanted to be. And some changed their mind between being a policeman, a fireman, an astronaut, a footballer. For me, it was literally, I I want to be a footballer, and I want to, I want to play at the highest level, and I want to lift a trophy at Wembley. They were like and I wanted to be on Question of Sport. That was another one as well. So growing up, when I managed to do that, I've done that a few times as well. So that was pretty good. But lifting a trophy at Wembley, walking out and just seeing the sea of blue at our end where we came out, phenomenal. Honestly, that's probably the most nervous I've been before any game, and I include the World Cup. The World Cup actually, I think because of what the experience I'd had at Wembley and that moment of trying, I felt a bit better about it, and I got nervous. You got the butterfly, you got the buzz for the game, but I always felt I slept well the night before games, and I was absolutely fine. That's probably the most nervous I've been for any game, and I actually should have scored early on in the game as well. It irritates me even to this day. About 15, 20 minutes in, I should have done better with the shot, and that bothers me even to this day. But even though we won. But that moment coming out and just seeing the fans, and it's hard to describe really, because it's all the work that I put in, all the training, all the sacrifices, all the not going out with my mates, all the things that you can do when you're younger, that I'd sacrificed and put to one side because all I ever had in my mind was to be a footballer. It all came true in that moment. So it was, I can't really describe it. I've still got, I get goosebumps about it now. It's an amazing feeling. My most treasured moment of that day is going back and watching it at home with my dad. We actually, the celebrations went well into the night, as you can imagine. I'm sort of probably going off track here, but
no, it's fine.
The bus journey home, we played Wonderwall all the way home. It went on over and over again on a loop. George Burley was back. We were having beers on the bus. We had a brilliant time. We got to the Suffolk Showground. Jim Magilton had the mic and no one could get it off him. So that was fine. But at that moment, although I wanted to celebrate with the lads and enjoy it, I was sort of like probably quite drained by what the whole season, the day itself, and all I wanted to do really was go home and have a beer with my dad and chat to him, because he was the one that took me here, there, and everywhere as a kid. Never missed a game till I was about 17, 18. Was the one that was really sort of I always say my biggest fan and my biggest critic. We had so many silent car journeys home after matches. You didn't do this. You should have done that. You should have done, and there was, but he was also my biggest fan as well. And to be able to sit at home that night and watch the game back, and he look at me and go, "You're a Premier League footballer, son." And that moment was pretty special.
Awesome, absolutely brilliant. I mean, we've gone to talk about what happened after the game, but we probably should touch upon what happened in it. It was an absolute classic playoff final as well. It's surely the greatest playoff trilogy of all time. And yeah, did you ever, because we went behind and then obviously at 1-1 we conceded the penalty. Was there any point where you thought this could get away from us, or were you always quite confident that we had the quality, even with Johnson and Scowcroft not playing?
That's obviously Scully injured and then Jono going off early as well. But as I said to you in the semi-final, going behind in games wasn't an issue because we'd done it before, so it didn't affect the mentality of the players. It was something that we were quite used to it through the course of the season, and we didn't panic. And I think that was when I talk about characters and leaders, and as a captain, it makes it easier because you've got people who've got that experience, and we had 6 or 7 captains in the side really, that there was never really a sense of panic about it. And it helped that Richard Naylor had the game of his life as well, and it could have happened to a nicer guy as well. I mean, you talk about playing through the pain barrier and someone that would put his body on the line. I mean, some of the injuries that he suffered in his career, and for him to put in that performance at Wembley that he did, it was just phenomenal for him. He was my eldest favourite player growing up. Bam Bam, he loved Bam Bam. So for him to have the game of his life at Wembley was just superb. And look, the game actually is a bit of a blur really. It's sort of came and went. And people often say when you're playing those games, enjoy it, enjoy the occasion. It'll be gone like that, and that's exactly how it happened. The day just went like that. It went out. It went in a flash. So the game's a bit of a blur, but the moment I knew was when, not until then, when Martin scored the fourth. Once that went in, I could actually breathe and feel a bit better about the fact that we were going to win the game.
Excellent. And was lifting the trophy a blur as well, or can you take yourself back into that moment as well?
No, I think that was a bit more because it was all done and dusted. You can actually breathe, and it's a bit of time after the final whistle as well, and just being able to. I mean, I probably rushed it. I probably got up the steps, couldn't wait to get the trophy. I think I got a hug off David Sheepshanks, and so yeah. just being able to lift that trophy in the direction of the blue and white, the sea of blue and white, was just a moment that will live me forever.
Brilliant. And then the celebrations at the Cornhill, was it the next day or 2 days later?
Oh yeah. We had the open top bus, didn't we?
Yeah, was there a few beers on that bus as well? Did it get pretty lively?
Yeah, I'm sure it did.
You don't remember?
I wasn't. No, not because I had too many to drink, but I just I think the focus then is already starting, isn't it, on the following season as well for me. But no, I remember the bus parade, of course I do, and I remember the sort of seeing the fans in seeing the array of fans again that had come out to celebrate was just amazing. So I've got a few pictures of it, and I look back and think, what was I wearing? And think, honestly, some of the. But hey, who cares now? It doesn't matter.
Excellent. So at this stage, you've played 3 full seasons for Ipswich. You didn't miss a single game. You started every single one of them as well, cups as well. Did you ever play injured? Did George get onto you a little bit if you didn't want to play, or was it just a case of you never got injured?
I never not wanted to play. I played with knocks and bruises, and there's some games that I probably shouldn't have played, if I'm brutally honest. But
can you remember any of them?
Not any in particular. When we beat Sunderland 5-0, and Fanidi scored.
Yeah.
You remember that? The chip at the top.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, brilliant.
That game was probably one of the worst I'd felt. I had an ankle injury, and it was strapped. I didn't. I remember getting through the game and not making a tackle in that game. And luckily we'd won quite comfortably, and I didn't have to make a tackle. But my left ankle in that game was in bits. So I remember that one in particular. I'm trying to think of any others. There was a load of times when I shouldn't have played. Some of the fitness tests were laughable. I mean, literally laughable. I one particular fitness test, we went away from home. I can't even remember where we were, but we literally, George, 8 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday morning, before breakfast, he got me out to the bus. He got a ball off the bus. We're in the car park, and he sort of done do a few headers. I was sort of wincing, and I was like threw the ball to me, doing a few side foots, and said, "What do you think? I said, struggling. I said, he said, "Think you'll be all right." All right, I said, I'll give it a go. That was honestly, it was like that a couple of times.
But it didn't seem to do you any harm, because you were still playing well into your 30s and playing pretty much every game at Charlton, weren't you?
I got to 35, and I mean, now you'd laugh. I mean, first 5 minutes of a morning, if I was a horse, you'd put me down probably. But it takes me a little while to get the old joints moving, and I am a bit stiff at times, particularly I'll say the ankles and knees a little bit, but I hit my right hip, but I wouldn't change any of it.
It's worth it. Yeah.
I wouldn't change any of it. And if I had those choices to make again, absolutely, I'd have an injection. I'd have whatever it takes to play. So I wouldn't change it. And
you mentioned George Burley's fitness test. Is it true that he also got you to take a dip in the sea to try and cool an injury once?
Yeah, well, a few times actually. He used to send me to Brightling Sea. Well,
Okay.
that was the nearest. That was nearest to where I lived, Brightlingsea, the coast. I was still about 25 minutes away. It wasn't like it was next door, but it's even send me home early from training sometimes, and so I'd have treatment in the morning. And he'd say, right, instead of having treatment in the afternoon, he said, go home via the beach and go and have like an hour and paddling in Brightlingsea. So I spent many afternoons in Brightlingsea, just honestly blowing a gale, pouring with rain.
Yeah, how was that in January?
Yeah, exactly. I was out there with my coat on, freezing, with my feet in the sea, trying to get fit for the weekend.
Brilliant. Well, we do appreciate it, Matt. And that run of you not missing games did carry on into the Premier League, and you seem to take to it like a duck to water, as did the rest of the Ipswich team. Was the gulf in quality between the First Division and the Premier League Premiership at the time bigger or smaller than you expected, or was it just that we played to the standard?
I don't really know, to be honest. I think the opening day was quite a rude awakening when we played Spurs. Yeah, Mark Vina scored early on, and then I think it was the moment where we realised you can't make silly mistakes. You get punished for it, because the quality and the step up, I guess, was quite evident. They'd spent 15 million on a striker who ended up scoring, and that was the moment where you thought, right, well, we can't do that. You can't get away with silly little mistakes at times. But that the first home game against United, I think, was the moment where we thought, actually, we'll be all right here, because they were the champions. They won it 2 years running, I think, and actually won it for the third year that year as well. But that moment was the moment, I think, that we all thought, hang on a minute, we'll be all right here, because we can mix it with these. We'll be okay. So I don't know. I think that just gave us an awful lot of confidence, that game against United, to kick on that season.
Yeah, another fantastic night with Fabian Wilness's goal. Probably should have won that night as well. Beckham scored with a cross, didn't he, in that one? But at the time, did you think that you and your teammates appreciated just how special it was, or was it just like any other season? You're just trying to win on the Saturday.
I don't think you think about it. Honestly, I don't think you think about it. We were all very close to each other, very professional as well. All had quite a strong desire to perform. We had a lot of players who hadn't necessarily played at that level before as well. So I don't know. I just think there was a really good spirit and camaraderie about the group. And I don't think anyone really would let anyone rest on what they'd achieved. It was just like, that's done. What's ahead now is the most important thing. And that season, George actually did set us targets each month. He'd sit us down and we'd have like the fixtures for the month ahead, and he'd sort of ask us, how many points do you think we're going to get from this, and we have to be honest about it and what we thought we might get, and he'd say, this is what I think, and this is where we can, so there was always not a case of resting on what you'd done or thinking about what you've achieved. It was always a case of, right, what's next? What can we do? What can we do better? What can we improve on? How can we get, how can we do even better than we have been doing as well? So there was always, I think, and that drive from individuals as well to push on and do well at that level as well.
Were you surprised by how well you matched up on a personal level to the likes of Keane, Vieira, Gerrard, Scholes? And it's a classic question. It's quite a boring one, but who gave you your hardest game in the Premier League?
It's difficult. So many, there's so many good players at that time. You just mentioned a few, and I think Gerrard was just starting to come through, wasn't he, as well? There was so many good players that you came against. For me, it was always about testing myself against the best. It's what I'd grown up wanting to do, and for me, the bigger the name, the bigger the challenge, really, and wanted to impose myself on some of the bigger names. It's difficult because, Man United's midfield at that time was ridiculous, wasn't it? Beckham, Scholes, Keane, Giggs. That's
Nicky Butt in reserve.
Nicky Butt in reserve. It was a frightening midfield that they had at that particular time. Roy was obviously a tough competitor. Vieira, Gerrard. I always say Gerrard was difficult because he was a real box-to-box midfielder as well. Someone that wanted to get back and challenge you, whereas then he'd be up and trying to race back into the opposition box. Sometimes, like Frank Lampard, for instance, would not necessarily chase you all the way into the box. He'd sort of pass you on to the centre halves, and then as soon as you lost the ball, you could see him. He was going the other way, and you're thinking, "Oh no, I've got to get back now." So he was very clever in the way that he did things. I don't know. It's very difficult, really, for me to pick out any individuals. But I just enjoyed the challenge of playing against the biggest names, really.
You ended up making over 200 appearances in the Premier League. Do you think that the league sort of suited you in a way because you never really needed time on the ball to play your game, and you were good working in tight spaces? You were a runner, as you mentioned before, lots of energy, good tackler. Do you think that the Premier League suited you in a way?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know really. I mean, again, it's for others to judge. I obviously enjoyed the challenge of playing in the Premier League, and I kept things quite simple. I didn't try. I wasn't someone that tried to overcomplicate things. I did play to my strengths. I didn't try and be anything that I wasn't. I didn't try and be Kieron Dyer, who might go and take people on. I didn't try and be Jim Magilton, who might be able to hit those big crossfield passes or pick out his centre forwards all the time. I played to my strengths. I was energetic, box to box, kept things simple, kept the ball moving. I don't know. I mean, it's for others to judge whether the Premier League suited me or not, but I certainly enjoyed the challenge of playing at the top level.
Absolutely. And you did eventually miss out on your first game that season, though, when you were left out of a game against Crewe in the Cup. I think it might have been to do with being in an international squad. So that was 200 odd games in succession. That was going to be my question. Were you angry?
Yeah, I was fuming. Yeah. I wanted to play every game. I mean, look, George would have explained it, and his reasons were probably the right ones at the time. But I remember because I travelled as well. If he's not going to play me and I'm going to be sat in the stand, you're wondering why has he even brought me up here? I'm thinking I've travelled all the way to Crewe, and you're going to sit me in the stand. I was a bit frustrated. He could have put me on the bench even, or and I could have come on and I have to. Next time I see him, I'll have to bring that up with him again.
Well, you know what, Matt? I don't think you did too badly out of it, because I remember the camera showing you on the highlights in the stand, and all the Ipswich fans thinking, "Oh, good on Matt Holland, even though he's not playing, he still travelled up there to watch them." So,
well, actually, I did used to travel. It didn't matter if even if I was injured, I would have gone to the game anyway. There's no, that I'm not moaning about that at all. But I'm just making the point that he sent me all the way to Crewe. He's taken me all the way to Crewe, and he's not even put me on the bench. I'm not even getting changed. I'm still in my tracksuit. I'm thinking, what? I want to play, and so I would have been frustrated. But even if I was injured, I still would have travelled with the team.
Brilliant. And yeah, we had some fantastic nights again that season. Fantastic days, of course, as well. Winning away at Liverpool, winning away at Everton. You scored a goal that helped relegate Man City right at the end of the season. Obviously, the United game that you've already mentioned. What are the games that you look back on with most fondness from that season?
Well, I enjoyed my first Premier League goal against Charlton, ironically. So I enjoyed that. The Everton game really stands out, actually, as a big memory because of the reaction of the Everton supporters post-match. And that is something that will always stick with me, because often when a team's getting hammered at home, the fans disappear and just boo their own team off. The Everton fans all stayed and clapped us off the pitch. And that was one of my most favourite memories of that season. The fact that we'd put a display on as we had done at Everton, and the supporters there recognised what a good performance it was from us as well. So that actually would have been one of my favourite memories. Obviously, winning at Anfield's amazing, something will always stick with me. But that Everton game is probably the one memory where I really thought, that's really classy, actually, of the Everton supporters.
Yeah, definitely. And you were playing against one Paul Gascoigne in that game as well, weren't you? Was that? Is that your?
I've actually got his shirt. I've actually got his shirt from that game as well. I mean, what a player! What a player! What a sad story, really. I'll tell you a quick story from that game. There was a break in play 25 minutes into the game, and stood next to him, and he's got Holland 8 written on his hand. He's literally written it in biro across his hand, and I'm sort of stood with him laughing and joking and said, "What? Seriously, what's that about?" He said, "Honestly," he said, "he tells me I'm marking and corners and stuff, and I forget." He said, "So I have to write it on my hand so I remember who I'm supposed to be picking up from set pieces." He said, "Because I always forget." So that he had my name written on his hand. It was like madness, really. And then I did get his shirt actually for that game. I wasn't one of those that was sort of chasing to get shirts and stuff, but it just happened that I ended up getting his shirt at the end of that game.
Brilliant. And did he take yours as well?
I don't know. Good question. I hope so. I hope he's still got it somewhere. I don't know. Just on shirts quickly, I'll tell you a quick story about shirts. Ruud van Nistelrooy. I got his Dutch shirt, and and then about Old Trafford, I think it might have been. I got a tap on the shoulder. We've come off the pitch, and he asked me for my shirt. And he said, you got my Dutch shirt. He said, can I have your shirt? I said, yeah. And this was asked me for my shirt. He said, your name is Holland. I come from Holland. I was like, oh, shit. I thought it was because he thought I was a good player, but obviously not.
Brilliant stuff. Then, well, you weren't that far behind him that season, were you? That first season, we finished in 5th. The European tour came the next season. Obviously, it was a disappointing league campaign. Do you think that the European tour, in a way, where we played in Moscow, Helsingborg, and then into Milan and the San Siro, do you think that was the reason why we got relegated? Was that distraction early on in the season, having to play on Thursdays and Sundays, or do you think that's sort of an easy excuse for why it went wrong?
I think it's a reason. I think there was a number of reasons. I think it is one of them. I think because, as I said earlier, I think there's a lot of attention when we first got promoted. We're in the Premier League. It's the first time a lot of players have played at that level. The following year, the UEFA Cup was something fresh, something new. Again, it was a new experience for a lot of players, and a lot of perhaps the attention went onto the UEFA Cup, and we perhaps took our eye slightly off the Premier League. There was a number of players that didn't play as well that season, and I'll be the first to hold my hands up and say that I didn't have a great season. So there was a number of players that didn't play to the level that they had done the previous season, so that didn't help. And then there's people will blame Finidi and Matteo Serini. I don't blame them individually or at all. What I would say is that there's a number of players who in that dressing room who sort of been there, seen it, done it all the way, and seen the journey really from an early point to get to promotion and get to where we got the previous season. And I think there was one or two who felt they'd come in on big money, and that perhaps disrupted a bit of harmony in the dressing room, and not because they were bad lads at all, because they mucked in and were good lads, so it wasn't that at all. But I think the fact that they were perhaps earning a lot more money than some of the others who'd been there, seen it, and grafted to get to that point, maybe didn't help. So I think there was sort of you can put them all together, and when all that happens, that's why we ended up ultimately failing that year.
Yeah, so we dropped down to Division 1, but you, of course, were picked for the Republic of Ireland squad after helping them qualify for the 2002 World Cup in Japan and Korea. And you scored, of course, in the first group game against Cameroon, a game that you've already mentioned. How special was that? Can you explain what that was like?
Well, again, it's one of those moments where you grow up watching some of the World Cups, 82, 86. I remember them, 90, all those World Cups that you grow up, and it's the biggest thing. It's the biggest stage, and a dream really to play at that level. Just to be selected to play at that level. That the goal was just wow. I mean, to play in a World Cup special, to score in a World Cup makes it even bigger. Again, my dad was there, which was a brilliant. He's sadly no longer with us, but he was at the game and he was able to see that. My wife, my two boys were there. When I scored, scoring is an unbelievable feeling. It doesn't matter to me, it didn't matter whether it was against Port Vale away, whether it was against Cameroon in the World Cup. It means the same because it's only one goal anyway. So the feeling of scoring a goal is unbelievable. And for a moment in that game particularly, I lost myself and didn't know where I was running and what I was doing. And I ran to the right hand side of the goal until it sort of clicked. And I remembered where my family were because I'd seen them before. They'd had to get there really early because it was a bullet train that took them to the match, and they'd been at the stadium sort of 2.5 hours before kickoff. So when we came out to do our little walk on the pitch and have a look at it, they were there and I'd seen them. And I hadn't seen them for 4 or 5 weeks up until that point because we'd been away since the end of the season. We had Narquin's testimonial, I think, straight away at the back end of the season, and we were away. So we'd had a couple of weeks in Japan as well, and so saw them. I knew where they were. Then I run around the back of the goal and I'm shrugging Robbie Keane off, Damien Duff, Mark Kinsella's trying to grab me. And so I could just wave to the family. What I didn't realise, one of my kids was asleep. It had been an early start, so he was asleep. My wife threw a can of Coke over everybody around her. Nobody cared. Nobody cared though. It was one of those moments. And so yeah, that is one of the personally an ultimate. Obviously team-wise, playing at Wembley and then drawing with Germany even in the next game was perhaps even a bigger result than the one against Cameroon. But from a personal level, playing and scoring at a World Cup, it doesn't get much better.
And of course, before that game, there was the infamous training ground bust up between Mick McCarthy and Roy Keane. And so this is an Ipswich Town podcast, and both of those blokes went on to be Ipswich Town managers with varying degrees of success. Where did you stand on what happened, and would you have rather have been lining up alongside Roy Keane than without in that Cameroon game?
Of course, you'd rather have Roy in the team. He's a world-class player, and of all the players that we had in our squad, he was the one that if you asked any other of the international teams who would they take out of our side, I reckon they'd all, obviously people would have said Robbie Keane and Damien Dyer, but the majority would have said we'll have Roy because he was that good. So of course we missed him. In terms of what his grievances were, I agreed with a lot of what he said and what he thought. The fact that we'd got somewhere, the balls hadn't. Mick agreed with it as well. The balls hadn't arrived, the training ground wasn't up to scratch. It was a bit more of a relaxation and a rest and recuperation week. But even so, you're at that stage, you expect the best. He was used to the best. He'd been at Man United where everything was perfect. They had a lot more money than the FAI had as well. So he was used to things being perfect. I think he'd had a conversation with Mick, and I think Mick thought that was it. And I think the fact that Roy then aired his grievances in public and did an article in the paper, I think that kicked it all off again. It opened up the hornet's nest, and that was the reason why it kicked off. I actually agree with a lot of what Roy said and thought, but I'm not sure I would have jeopardised a place at a World Cup for it. But we're different characters. I'm very, very different to Roy. But at the same time, I could understand Mick being frustrated as well, that he thought he dealt with it in private, and then the whole thing had been made public by Roy in an article in the Sunday paper. So it was a real shame that what happened, because it would have been nice to play alongside Roy in midfield.
And it was a decent World Cup campaign for Ireland. You were eventually knocked out on penalties by Spain, and there was a lot of clubs interested in you that summer, Matt. What ultimately made you stay at Ipswich Town when there was so much interest from Premier League clubs?
Well, I think the only bid that was ever accepted was Aston Villa. I think that was the only one that the club actually accepted. I think there might have been interest from others. I don't know is the honest answer. And I wasn't actively looking to go straight back to the Premier League because I felt that I wanted to get Ipswich back into the Premier League, having not played well the previous season. I wanted to get the club back to where I felt we belonged at that stage. So I found the only club I was given permission to speak to was Aston Villa. I spoke to Graham Taylor, and I had a 4-year contract at Ipswich at the time, so I was 28, and my contract ran till I was 32 at Ipswich. And Graham Taylor was brilliant actually. I think he was struggling because his chairman wasn't willing to sort of go the extra mile and push the boat out. They only actually offered me a 3-year deal, and the money. I mean, the money was better for 2 years, but was less than I was going to be earning at Ipswich in the 3rd year. So I said to Graham, look, if you really want me, you're going to have to. You're going to have to really want me. You're going to have to give me at least a 4-year deal, match what I'm doing, and the money's going to have to be better than it is at Ipswich. And his chairman just wouldn't do it because he said that the 3rd year I'd have turned 30, and he wasn't willing to pay a 30-year-old that money. So that was that really. I did feel an obligation to try and get Ipswich back into the Premier League as well. So that was that's me being brutally honest about the whole situation and how it panned out. Did speak to them, and I was willing to make the move because obviously I want to play at the Premier League, but at the same time I did feel a sense that I wanted to get Ipswich back.
Yeah, and we were all grateful that you stayed, and it was actually a really good Ipswich team that missed out on the playoffs that year. Obviously Thomas Gardso coming through, Darren Bent, Darren Ambrose at the start. Ryderson was still there at the start as well. We weren't so strong in goal, but we'll ignore that one. But yeah, Benjamin Bloom had an interesting question for you on free kicks, because you started to take a few more free kicks in that second season in the Premier League, and then in that the season after the relegation, sort of the indirect free kicks. Was that something that you always had in the locker, or was that something that you decided to bring into your game as you got a little bit older?
No, I scored a few. I actually scored a few like that for Bournemouth as well. If you look back, I scored one at Shrewsbury. I scored one at Gillingham. I'd scored a few that type of free kick. I wasn't the most elegant in terms of free. I wasn't the one who's floated one over the top of the goalkeeper like Martin Reusser, for instance, who he could get it up and down quickly and top corner. I was someone that went for power. That was just George Burley said, "I've got the driver." That was use the driver at times as well. So it was literally that's all it was really. I don't remember consciously taking more free kicks. I don't remember that personally, but it's interesting that it's been spotted by someone.
And yeah, you did eventually have to go though. Charlton came calling at the end of that season. How hard was it to say goodbye to Ipswich fans? Yeah. You scored in your last game away at Derby. That was sort of a nice send off. But how difficult was it to say goodbye to Ipswich?
Yeah, I think I always knew that it was probably going to be my last game, and it was pretty much my last touch in an Ipswich shirt. I think it might even have been my last touch in an Ipswich shirt, scoring at Derby. But financially, there was, David Sheepshanks basically said you're going to have to go. And I was on international duty actually with Ireland when I got the phone call that they'd accepted bids from Portsmouth and Charlton. And I flew back. I played the game, I think, and flew back straight into Stansted. And I think I went and met Alan Kirbishley. Spoke to Harry Redknapp. He'd been my manager at West Ham as well. Ironically, not let me go, but sort of offered me a deal at West Ham, but at the same time said, I'm down the pecking order, and if you want to go to Bournemouth, then absolutely, that won't stand in your way. So he tried to sign me for Portsmouth, but again, once I'd spoken to Alan Kirbishley, I was pretty much made my mind up really about where he saw me playing and how he saw it going. And I often sort of think that Charlton's quite similar to Ipswich in terms of the club, the size of the club, the fan base, the way it's very much a community-based club as well, and so. I didn't really get an option. I was going. It was just where I was going to go to. It was very difficult to say goodbye because I'd had 6 unbelievable years, and if at a choice, I'd love to have said I'm going to stay here for the rest of my career and I'm going to be 35 and waving goodbye at 35 to the Ipswich fans. It would have been nice to have played 500 plus games for the club. You know, those things I look back on and think it would have been great to do, but it unfortunately wasn't to be. Look, Charlton was a good club and I had some really good times and enjoyed my time there as well. But it was always tough. It was really tough to say goodbye.
Yeah, and I think I can speak for most Ipswich fans when I say that we always wished you well at Charlton and started looking out for their results. And then you were obviously joined there by Heridison and Darren Ambrose later on, and Charlton became Charltown.
It did, yeah.
But yeah, I think you played over 100 times in the Premier League for Charlton, and then you retired pretty much still in the Premier League, weren't you?
No, Championship at the time. When I retired at 35, I actually people say, "Oh, could you have carried on? Could you have played a bit longer?" What I didn't want was to be sort of chasing around looking for a year's contract here and there. I wanted to sort of go in my terms, and actually I started to do more and more in the media, and it just sort of happened that I ended up doing that sort of stuff. Became more, I don't know, I became busier in that respect. At 35, I wasn't really sure what I was going to do when I finished. It was a case of Andy Townsend actually said to me, just keep as many doors open as possible, because you never know which door's going to open when you turn 35. It might be the coaching door, it might be the media door, whatever it might be. It might be something totally different. You just don't know what's going to open. And it just so happened that at 35, the media door opened wider than any other. And people often ask me about management and coaching and would I have done it and would I like to do it? Yeah, is the answer. I would. I actually got offered the reserve job at Charlton under Ian Dowie. He offered me the reserve job there when he was in charge. But I was 33 and I felt I still had a bit to offer, and I felt it was too early really for me to take it. So I decided against it at that particular time. And then I applied for the Ipswich job once. That's the only job I've ever actually physically applied for. When I say applied, I didn't put the CV in, but I went and spoke to the club and said that I'd like to be considered. But the decision was already made that they were going to go for a bit more experience, really. And so I totally understood that. I always say, look, never rule anything out, but I think my time has probably gone in terms of being a manager now. I always say that I'd probably be divorced if I was a football manager. And sometimes you have to put your family before football. And I'm the sort of person that you might be able to tell listening to me. I live and breathe football. I get moaned at now for watching too much football at home. And I'm not a manager. If I was a manager, I'd be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'd be on the phone. I'd be thinking about it. I wouldn't be sleeping. It would affect my family life. And so sometimes you have to put your family ahead of it at times. And so there's definitely a bit of me that would like to have had a go. And I watch matches now when I'm commentating, and I watch them as a manager, and I think, right, if I was in charge of this team, what would I do? Would I take him off? How would I change it? Would I go to a back four? Would I go? All those things go through my mind when I'm watching a game, because it's what I've always done. It's what and I love the game so much. But I think my time of perhaps having a go at it has gone.
Excellent. I can't believe that I forgot that you were in the Championship with Charlton, because he bloody scored against us, didn't he? But is that right?
No, I don't think I did.
No, maybe it's Darren Ambrose then. It must be Darren
Ambrose. I actually crossed it for Darren Ambrose. I crossed the ball from the right, and I remember sort of thinking, do I celebrate? And I ended up running back to the halfway line, having a bit of a celebration. I actually hit the post in the same game. I hit the post late on in the game. I'd scored against Charlton, obviously my first Premier League goal. I played a pre-season friendly for Charlton and scored against Bournemouth. I scored against West Ham, but no, I didn't score against Ipswich.
Okay, well, I'll have to apologise again for that one. And yeah, me getting that question wrong sounds like that probably is a good place to end the show. Thank you very much for joining us, Matt. I'm sure that everyone will enjoy watching this one through. Absolute
pleasure. Really appreciate it, you having me on. And can I just say to everyone, please keep safe and well. You know, it's a strange old time that we find ourselves in at the moment. I think we're all struggling a little bit. You know, we all like football back, and we'd all like to be back at Portman Road. But please keep safe, keep well, look after yourselves, and when it resumes, hopefully we'll be back in the Championship very soon.